Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux, taking a look at the Grade 3 $1 million Dueling Grounds Derby at Kentucky Downs on Sunday. It's race number 11. It's at a mile and 5/16 on the turf. And before we take a look at this big field, remember that our Labor Day sale is going on at shop.drf.com. Up to 50% off your favorite DRF products, PPs, picks, clock reports, and the digital paper. Here's the field for the Dueling Grounds Derby. Big purses, big fields, competitive races. Deserving favorite, however, the 9 Far Bridge won the Belmont Derby 2 starts back. Distance is not an issue. And I think some things worked against him last time out, Ashley. It was a yielding turf course. I think the winner is pretty good. And that winner got away with an easy lead while Far Bridge was wide.
Yeah, I think actually the top two, Webslinger's been able to do some nice things so far in his career. It was a tough race. You've already talked about the ground. I think a couple of horses, they've had some problems over softer ground, yielding conditions as well, and others, they've been okay over it. So it's an interesting field top to bottom, and just Kentucky Downs is just such a tough track to handicap with the configuration and the course just being so different than what we traditionally see at a lot of tracks, which I think, there's always the potential for upsets. We've already seen that a bunch on opening day. So, this is going to be a tough race to handicap and wager on, but it should be a good betting opportunity.
Well, let's throw up the Timeform US pace projector. And I agree with our friends at Timeform US. The number 8 Wizard of Westwood's best game is when he gets to the front. We saw that at Santa Anita 2 starts back. He couldn't get the lead in the Belmont Derby. Didn't run that great last time out, but he should be forwardly placed, as should the 2 Desert Duke.
He definitely should be. I think looking at Wizard of Westwood, he's typically found himself on the front end, at least going around 2 turns, with races where he hasn't been able to. We mentioned a little trouble last time, and then that one effort in the Baffle, which is going 6.5 on the downhill. So I think he's going to be forwardly placed from the gate. I agree. Desert Duke has been in some races where he's been pretty close to it. And actually, if you go back 4 or 5 starts, going a little further back, he's been the pace setter in a couple of his efforts. So there's also, as you can see here, we're looking at that late pace flag here, goes to Far Bridge. And this is a horse that true and true has been a closer, and in some of his races, his best performances have been when he's been pretty far back early on.
Well, we know a horse that's likely going to be very far back is the 1 Red Route 1. He fits this race beautifully from a class perspective. Let's watch his most recent start, the Grade 3 West Virginia Derby. He was dropping in class after competing in 2 of the 3 legs of the Triple Crown. And this is Red Route 1. He got a right pace setup, and he comes with a strong kick. And the good news for Red Route 1 fans is he's a proven commodity over the Kentucky Downs turf course. He won his maiden here as a 2-year-old, and horses for courses, that's just as good an angle as any at Kentucky Downs.
I think that's a huge upside, right? That he at least has a turf win. And then you've mentioned it's right at Kentucky Downs, and it was going shorter. It was going a mile. So different configuration there as well. But it was a good effort. It was just his second career start. And since then, you look at some of his races, because he's such a deep closer, sometimes he just doesn't get the pace setup that he needs. But last time out, I thought at the mile and an eighth, he raced very good. He was much the best in that field. He didn't go off favored. And it's been a productive race. A couple runners from that race have come back to win next out. So he's intriguing. The big thing is we haven't seen him on the turf in a while, but at least he's got that already on his resume.
The 2 is Desert Duke, and Desert Duke is some early speed, as we saw on the pace projector. He's just got to get away from the gate. Sometimes that's a little bit of a problem for him, but he's shown some quality. Stakes place 2 and 3 starts back. Last time out at Ellis Park, several horses encountered a little bit of trouble. Desert Duke was one of them. I wonder if we've seen his best race. He's sort of a mid-80s buyer horse. I think he needs to take a little bit of a step forward, but he's bred to handle the distance, and he can work out a trip if he breaks well.
I think he's intriguing at the right price in terms of maybe the exotics in here. You mentioned he did have that trouble last time out, and looking at the preview, obviously several runners are exiting that race, and I think looking at the others that finish in front of him, they're probably going to offer less value, but if you have trouble in that race, what do you take out of it? I go back a couple of races before that when he tried it a mile and an eighth. He's had to face Webslinger and Wadsworth, 2 times, and each of them in his last 4, and he's not going to face either of them. I just think he's an intriguing type, and I know we haven't seen him go any further than a mile and an eighth, but I have a feeling he might be okay at this distance if he can get around the Kentucky Downs turf course.
The number 3 is really good, and he ran really well over this surface last year, when 3rd in the juvenile. And his most recent start, he got a beautiful ride over a less than firm turf course in the Kent, and he was stretching all the way out to a mile and 3/8 for this race. And you saw that Ruben Severa had an opportunity to get outside that number 3 horse. He decided to alter course back inside. He's eventually going to get a split and rally very strongly up the rail. This horse stays all day long.
And he was the only horse really in the stretch that was making up ground over that soft turf. And I think that's a promising thing to see. That's never easy. And this is a horse where, yes, he did have the effort at Hawthorne over the yielding going, but it still can be very tough. And I also think he's just improving. I know he had a pretty good 2-year-old season. He came back with less than ideal 2 races back to back that weren't stellar, but he's been very good in his last 2 and excited to hopefully see him over firm ground once again.
The number 4, Lion of War, is used to these twists and turns and bumps over these European courses. He's raced over there. He was a winner 3 starts back. In his first start in North America, I was very surprised how eager he was in the early part of the Saratoga Derby. He pushed the winner that day. He eventually got tired. I'm going to give him a mulligan. I think his best race is going to come when they take him back, get him covered up, and make one run.
Yeah, I think he needs to go back to some of his tactics that he showed overseas in Great Britain, right? Looking at his races, there was some that he was kind of mid-pack early on making a move. That might be the best thing for him. As you mentioned, he kind of was keyed up, but maybe the ground did play a little bit into it last time as well. And just would hope that second time out here in North America, he can take a step forward. And I think it's interesting to see Jamie Spencer booked to ride.
The 5 is just a photo, and he made a successful turf debut when dropped into a maiden claimer in his most recent start at Ellis Park. He showed good tactical speed. He finished the race off nicely. Now he's going to stretch way out in distance and step way up in class for a new barn.
Tough call. I mean, they've claimed the horse. They're going to take a shot, and I appreciate that. And he raced well last time out at a mile and a 16th. I think based on that, yes, he can go further. Does he want to go this far? I don't really know. There's not much to go in terms of his form, but I did find it interesting that he raced at the maiden special weight ranks in an okay 4th, wasn't beaten by much, and his connections decided right off the shelf to put him in for a tag.
Brian Lynch trains our next 2 runners, the 6 Anglophile, the 7 Highway Robber, both coming out of the same race. The preview for the Dueling Grounds Derby held at Ellis Park last month. Both ran well. Anglophile and Highway Robber both got caught in a little bit of a tight spot on the far turn. Both finished pretty well. Anglophile earned an 88 buyer that day. He seems to be improving with every start, and he's a horse. I'm not sure if he's a true one-run closer. I think he can get closer if the pace is very slow.
Yeah, and we saw that at Ellis Park, right, when he was able to graduate a very slow pace going a mile. He was close to it. So I think he's more versatile than maybe it shows. Even his race 2 back going a mile and a quarter, a little bit closer to the pace in terms of, the distance he was off of the pace setters. To me, it's tough to separate his 2 runners, just knowing how they finish, and they both usually typically close from off of it. But I think if you like the 6, you probably also like the 7 in this spot.
Now, Highway Robber is cross-centered on Saturday going a mile. It'll be interesting to see if Lynch goes the longer distance or cuts him back. He's really taken a step forward since switching to the turf. A big effort 2 starts back, winning a 2-life race from off the pace. And last time out, again, sort of held up in between horses most of the way, kind of tried to squeeze his way through down on the rail in the stretch, and he finished okay.
I think if you're trying to distinguish between them, there's different things maybe to look at. I thought Highway Robber being the less experienced runner of the 2 and also having more limited starts over the turf. As you've mentioned, he's really picked it up on the grass. So it makes you wonder now, 3rd start on the grass, can he take another step forward? I think in terms of trip last time out, he was further back than his stablemate at one point and made a late run. So I'm a little bit more intrigued by Highway Robber. And I'm curious, though, as you've said, he's cross-entered. What are they going to do? Because he's gotten up in time or close to getting up in time in his last 2. So you wonder if he wants to go a bit further, maybe.
Wizard of Westwood is the number 8. He is our projected pace setter from Timeform US. He's done good things on the lead. Here's his win 2 starts back against stakes competition at Santa Anita, and he did this going a mile and a quarter. When he got to the lead, got a little bit of a breather, and he sprints on home. This was a good effort from this horse, who did not run well at all in the Belmont Derby when he didn't make the lead. He tracked and tired badly.
Yeah, the only time he's been able to sit and make some sort of move was going at a sprint distance on the downhill at 6.5. And it's funny to watch him go from a mile to a mile and 1/8 to a mile and a quarter, because there were Definitely. At least I had questions going through these races for DRF, thinking, can he go further than that and win? And he was able to win at 1.25 miles. But as you mentioned, a lot had to do with him catching a breather after the opening half and able to kind of just set things to his liking. I'm nervous in here in the sense that, can he go this distance on the lead? That's a whole different task, and it's a different course, as we've touched upon several times now. But he is a horse that you have to at least consider from a pace perspective.
Grade 1 winner Far Bridge looks like the horse to beat based on his speed figures, based on his company lines. He's got the connections with Todd Pletcher and Jose Ortiz. I thought he worked out a good trip when he won the Belmont Derby. And last time out in the Saratoga Derby, we're going to see him try to get into this from the outside. And he must have been 4-5 path on the backstretch and into the turn. And the winner of this race is just a game horse, program training, controlled things up front. You talked about Web Slinger. And I just wonder if Farbridge had trouble digging into this yielding turf course and showing his best.
I think he did. You can kind of watch his stride at points when he's trying to grab the ground, and maybe with the moisture in it, wasn't the most even surface as well. So you can kind of see him bounce around just a little bit in his stride, and have to think it was still a great effort for him, considering the conditions on the turf course. And the other two, as you saw at the top of the stretch, already had the jump on it. They were already in front of him, and he's trying to now close in on those horses that still had a ton of run left at them. So he is the horse to beat in here. You've touched upon it. His numbers, even if you go back 4 starts back. His lowest buyer ever has been an 87.
The 10 Battle of Normandy has shown some ability throughout his career and has hinted at potential, and he hasn't really broken through just yet. He was graded stakes placed as a 2-year-old, and then he had trouble winning first-level allowances at Keeneland and Pimlico. And I guess the excuse for the Keeneland race was his first start off a layoff. And if you want to make excuse for the Pimlico race, he was facing some older horses. We saw him finish 4th in the Saratoga Derby. I don't think he cared for that wet turf at all. He was on his wrong lead for most of the stretch. He's the kind of horse, give him some pace, he'll come with a kick. And I respect Shug McGahee's horses as they continue to mature and get more distance.
And I actually don't think the Pimlico race is that bad. I know he was heavily favored in that spot, but as you touched upon, it was older. I don't think the pace was anything crazy, right? It was pretty sensible throughout, and he was far back in that race. And I did think in the stretch he was really trying to get to the eventual winner there, just could not run that one down. So simply second best. I have to think he'll improve second out. I don't think he likes any moisture in the turf. He's had those 2 tries over the yielding, and they've been not great performances. Not that last time out was bad, but it just wasn't kind of what we saw both in Kentucky and Maryland. So I think he's actually probably a little bit of a wild card in here. I think he'll go off at decent odds as well, just knowing that others have better recent form.
And while Pletcher has the favorite, he also has a big priced horse on the morning line, the number 11. Clever Thought is 20-1 with Joel Rosario named to ride. And this guy's done very little wrong in his career. He just missed last time out in a first level allowance race. He's another horse that needs a trip. He needs some pace. He doesn't have a lot of early speed, but you just get the feeling by watching him that distance is his friend.
And I think he's a horse that we haven't seen his best yet. I think he's starting to progress and put everything together. And his only bad race, I think he had a ton of issues in there and lost some, valuable ground in that race. And he still tried throughout. So he's sneaky in here. I'm very curious to see what price he'll go off at, just knowing that he's the other Todd in here. You see Joel's booked to ride for Rapoli and Phipps. But the question would be for me, he's only got a maiden victory under his belt.
The 12 is out of deductions. He's 30-1 on the morning line. He's won 2 of his last 3 starts. The only loss came in the Hawthorne Derby, where he finished behind Really Good. He was favored that day. He does have a little bit of tactical speed. He overcame a bad start to win when they cut him all the way back last time out, but that was against weaker first-level allowance horses at Hawthorne.
Yeah, and from post 12 in the configuration, he's going to have to try to save ground from the get-go, because you don't have a ton of run to that first, I don't want to even call it a technical turn. It's kind of a weird setup, right, with that more European style turf course. But I would suggest, or not suggest, but I would expect that he's going to have to get in early and tuck in and try to save some ground. But luckily, as you've mentioned, he does have a little bit of speed.
Let's take a look at our top picks for the Grade 3 Dueling Grounds Derby on Sunday. You're going with Farbridge. Again, he's the horse to beat. He's got the class lines. And I think if he gets a firmer turf course than he did at Saratoga, he's going to fire in the stretch.
That's my thought process exactly. I think he's probably the horse to beat on paper, has the best numbers. And as long as he can work out the trip, I don't have too many reservations about him, but I have reservations about Kentucky Downs, just knowing that there are upsets left and right. And to me, I was actually more interested in trying to find horses in the exotics, such as the 7 and the 2, because I think they might offer value and they could go off at odds that if you're, getting a little bit curious to try to beat Farbridge, maybe I'd take a stance on them, but I found it hard to do.
I'm going to go with Highway Robber in here, one of the 2 Lynch trained horses. He's entered in the mile race. If he doesn't run here, I guess I'm going to land on Farbridge, although I am also interested in Anglophile. I'm also interested in the 10 Battle of Normandy. Should be a fun race. It's the Dueling Grounds Derby on Sunday. Good luck.